Even though I didn't want this platform, even though I don't want to be identified as the domestic violence survivor who went and fought back, like, damned if we don't need to have this conversation so that people know that they're not alone. In April of 2017, I wrote an Instagram post that was my way of coming out and sharing my story with the world. But more importantly than that, it was a cathartic message for me to say, this happened to me and I'm no longer ashamed. I no longer accept it as my fault. This is something that happened to me and I've been able to move forward in spite of it.
Reading your story made me realize how important it is to speak up, not just for ourselves, but for future victims.
Women's voices, victims' voices, are not heard until they're in duplicate or triplicate or more. It wasn't until Colby's story came out then with photographic evidence that they said, oh, now there's 2 women, so maybe it's more legitimate. And so as I continue to tell this story, it's been more and more empowering for me to recognize that even years after the fact, after I've done the work to process and forgive myself and forgive Rob, I still felt the weight that society puts on me, that somehow I had something to be ashamed of. It can happen to anybody. It's not just me. It's not just people in power or people in the trailer park or people with substance abuse problems. It's literally anybody. And until we start talking about how many people it is, society can still pretend that it's not them. It kind of makes me angry that we had to get to the point where dozens, if not hundreds of women have to tell their story before it becomes a big issue. I think when we look back on it, we as women, but hopefully we as society, will look back on it as a beautiful moment that we've been in for the last year and a half, where women are stepping into their power and owning their voices and allowing situations and issues that are important to them to be heard. We have a lot of work left to do. I think the first steps are not shying away from it in the media, not allowing this to be a conversation that is swept under the rug, not allowing the White House, not allowing the networks, not allowing any of the follow-up reporters to term this as sort of like the background story to the greater story. Because it's not a background story, it's a separate story that deserves its own attention. The more we have that conversation, the less scary and the less shameful it becomes. And right now we're not having these conversations because people don't want to be uncomfortable. Guess what? It's time to be uncomfortable because we need to have these conversations come out in the open so that we don't have to have them anymore. I think the most important thing is to honor the feelings that you're having. Because we feel ashamed, and shame is not comfortable, we really try to fight it and we try to hide from it, and that can sometimes turn to depression, it can turn to substance abuse, it can turn to sometimes anger and violence at other people in your life because you're dealing with your own shame and hurt. So I think it's really important to acknowledge the space that holds in your body, acknowledge the space that that's holding in your life and in your current relationships. Keep going, keep having the conversations, keep talking about it as calmly, as compassionately as you can, and don't let the anger and the hatred and the passion that you have block you from being able to make a difference.